You announced this partnership with AbCellera to go in the direction of finding a treatment with antibodies, and yet many of your competitors, like Alex Gorski was just on talking about a vaccine starting up in September, and Moderna is already in the clinic. Tell us why you went the route of antibody therapies to find a therapy for COVID-19 and how you're coming on it. I realize it's only been 2 weeks since you made the announcement, but what's your outlook?
Right. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. And maybe just start as well. Today is National Doctors Day. And from our company to every doctor in the U.S., and I'm sure from all of you in the studio, we want to thank our frontline healthcare workers right now. This is a serious moment for all of them. And we're all thinking of them as they go to their job today to save lives, which is what they train to do. We're trying to do our part, too. This is, you mentioned the AbCellera Therapeutics collaboration we have. And I think across the whole of industry, Bill, many companies, maybe all companies, are redirecting all discretionary scientific and medical prowess at the problem of arresting the coronavirus. For us, that falls into two tracks. One of them you mentioned, which is the AbCellera Therapeutics collaboration. We're good at making antibodies, at scaling them up, at producing them, at modifying them to be more like drugs. What AbCellera has done is isolated antibodies from actual human survivors of COVID-19 and have selected antibodies that appear to have a strong effect on arresting the spread of the virus. We're going to try to isolate those and make them into a 1, 2, or 3 antibody drug cocktail. We hope to start clinical trials as early as July. Other companies are doing different things, making vaccines or repurposing existing treatments. We've heard about antivirals and some anti-inflammatory drugs. We have one of those projects, too, with an anti-inflammatory drug, which is being tested by clinical investigators around the world called baricitinib to help those who have ARDS, the acute respiratory distress syndrome. That's another approach. But across the industry, everybody is working together and in a very rapid way to try to arrest this crisis.
So Dave, just to follow up on that, yesterday, the FDA announced a approval for anti-malaria drugs without any clinical trial work done, even though Vas Narasimha was on last week saying it could be 1.5 to 2 years. If they're promising results for the antibody therapies, is there a possibility that we might truncate the usual 1.5 or so of clinical trials and get there sooner? Is there a way to get there faster, or is it pretty much going to take that long?
Well, we hope so, and I think every signal we've received from the FDA and other government agencies is they are moving at light speed as well and would like to see this tested in patients first. We need to do a clinical experiment, but that won't take too long, and then potentially look at either a very large clinical trial to expose people who are sick and tested in the real life, or even a conditional license type arrangement where we can make it available. Interestingly, maybe the constraint might be how much we can produce, and we're pulling forward activities and planning around that so that we can make enough if it does work. So we're planning for the fastest possible route, and the FDA's move on these antimalarial signals, I think, their posture, which is to open up all aperture for solutions.
Hey, David, it's always great to see you. It's Jim.
Hey, Jim.
You mentioned something that is the holy grail. You're working on something for ARDS. ARDS is notoriously difficult. It's what's killing a lot of people. Killed my father. And when I was investigating it, as you obviously would as a son, I was told, and this was at Hub, forget about it, Jim. There's nothing for ARDS. Do you really think you have something?
Well, so there's a number of experts in immunology believe, ARDS happens in COVID-19 because of the response to the virus itself. Your body's own immune system is flaring up and producing a huge amount of response in your lungs to the virus. This is actually one of the main problems people have with oxygen exchange and breathing in the advanced stage of the disease. There are studies already announced with the so-called IL-6 inhibitors called Actemra and Kevzara from two other drug companies. This is thought to be a promising approach. If that works, the approach we're looking at likely also will make a difference because it works in a similar way, reducing that inflammatory response in your own lungs, which could keep people from going onto ventilators or get them off ventilation quicker. And as I said, Jim, there's studies in China, in Europe, and in the U.S. that are investigator-initiated now with our drug baricitinib looking at this problem. We'll talk more about that as we see the data, and we may decide to stand up an independent study ourselves.
Baricitinib, what a wonder drug. Thank you, David. What a wonder drug.
David, it's Carl. I hate to ask about Father on Mother's Day, but you do mention some of the different paths that pharma companies are taking, and it does feel like our viewers have received an inordinate amount of opinion about hydroxychloroquine. What do you tell people who are curious about it?
Well, it does have some preclinical effects. That's what our scientists have advised me. And there's a number of small studies that have been uncontrolled that look promising. You know, in our business, typically we like to do a randomized control study to really know whether something is making a difference. We haven't seen that data yet here. That said, I think the federal agencies have a different job than us. Our job is to prove effectiveness. Their job is to protect and promote the public health. That's the FDA's mission. And their judgment at this point is to move forward with less evidence, apparently. That's their call to make. I do think we would all benefit from a randomized control study being done with this medicine to see the true effect. I don't know that would take as long as the number Bill mentioned earlier, a year or two. I think you could do it pretty quickly. For our approach with AbCellera, this therapeutic antibody approach, we're planning for a relatively short study because if it works, it'll work very quickly. One would hope if it's really an antiviral effect with the malaria drugs, that would be quick as well.